All right, good morning, and thank you for joining us for our event titled Securing the Neighborhood, Enlargement, Partnership, Investment, and Values. With us today are four distinguished members of the European Parliament. We have Petras Ostravicius from Renew Europe. We have Marina Kaliurand from Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats, Miriam Lexman from European People's Party, and we're going to have also Lucas Mandl from European People's Party joining us shortly as well. Thank you for accepting our invitation. This event is part of GLOBSEC's project, Geopolitical Europe. Are the EU member states ready for it? And it is supported by the Jean Monnet activities of the Erasmus Plus program. I would like to remind everyone that our event is live streamed through our social media channels. And for all participants, I encourage you to keep your cameras on, but if you may please stay muted unless you are speaking. Feel free during the course of the conversation for all of us here in the meeting to write our questions in the chat function, or you can use the raise hand function, and time permitted, we will try to take as many questions as possible. We would like to have a nice discussion today. And I think without further ado, I will welcome Mr. Lucas Mandl as well. I see him here. Mr. Mandl, if you'd like to put your camera on, that would be great. All right, now let's start. Political and security crisis continue, stalling the way forward for the Eastern Partnership countries. We see from Belarus to the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh last year, from Georgia and Armenia just now, or the continuous issues in Ukraine, deterioration of the security situation, and really the assault on the rule of law puts at risk decades of international efforts of stabilization and democracy promotion. Meanwhile, in the Western Balkans, the situation is not much rosier, with continued political instability, unresolved conflicts, and a stronger than ever influence from external actors in the likes of Russia, China, and Turkey. The region is struggling to move closer towards European integration. And all of these regional developments take place amid a global health crisis, as we're very well aware, geopolitical tensions, and a high level of uncertainty. So keeping in mind this context, Mr. Ostravicius, or if I can call you Petras, let's get straight to it. Now, last week, you have signed a letter to Charles Michel, urging him to really get involved when he was traveling to Georgia. And this week, during his visit, President Michel indeed mediated or did get involved in a meeting between the ruling and opposition representatives. We know that there is a strongly deteriorating or fast deteriorating political development in the country. So thinking about this type of involvement and this type of action, what is and what should be the role of the European Union when it comes to the Eastern Partnership region, given this reoccurring instability that we keep seeing? And how can the EU be more assertive, more proactive? What are some of the strengths that we have, and how can we use them?
Well, good morning, and thank you very much to GLOBSEC for invitation to join this exchange on securing the neighborhood, enlargement, and our future relationship with our immediate neighbors. So, I mean, here probably is my starting point. I mean, look to Eastern Europeans. I mean, Eastern flank, we have indeed, I mean, immediate neighbors, as well as Western Balkans, not to speak about the southern neighborhoods, I mean, across the Mediterranean Sea. So, to my mind, the global composition of the world, as it stands for the time of being, requires from the European Union to be a very dynamic and proactive participant in all those undertakings. If we have, and it looks like, I mean, it pronounced, we have a mission, a kind of vision to be a global player. So if we don't play dynamically with results in close neighborhoods, there is no chance to be a global player. I think, generally speaking, our results from interaction with immediate neighbors will be a very determining factor to have this status as a global player. So, I mean, it's better probably stop talking about being a global player if we are not a real player in our neighborhood. And of course, in close neighborhood, we have a lot of, I would call it challenges, but at the same time, we have a political historical chance to contribute to further development, more stability, more economic development in our neighborhood. So that's why propositions with which we come towards our future relations with our, to speak directly with Eastern neighbors, is based on understanding that, you know, I mean, we can't divide security, economic cooperation, even political contacts into some kind of territorial boxes. I mean, everything is well connected. So that's why our letter to Mr. Charles Michel, once he took a trip to associated Eastern Partnership member countries, was one of the attempts, I mean, to ask and to push him, as well as the European Union in general, towards more kind of practical engagement. I mean, we have to be, you know, straightforward. I mean, talking partners. I mean, there should be no any, you know, kind of reserved or postponed issues for not for us. I mean, as we are restricted. I mean, to have a scope, a broader scope on all issues, and we have to be, you know, assisting and involving into everything what is on the ground. And indeed, well, I mean, situation in South Caucasus, I mean, to my understanding, excuse me, to my understanding is really very critical. I mean, after Armenia's and Azerbaijan war on Nagorno-Karabakh, I mean, we lost a lot of influence, and it wasn't the best, by the way, example of making politics from the European Union side. We have a high special representative for South Caucasus. I didn't see him, I mean, acting effectively in times of economic of war and high crisis situation. So now, I mean, we see again political crisis going on in Georgia, in Armenia, as after war situation. So I think it's a high time. We have to be in those countries when it's needed, not after, to make a report and to, you know, to put it next to many reports were already written. So that's why direct engagement, to talk straightforward, I mean, to our partners, and not to try to, you know, neglect some hot issues, because they need our support, and we need to have a very direct impact on the situation. So that's why I think we are learning. I mean, what comes to the European Union, not necessarily for better, because I'm very critical about the high representative involvement in many issues, especially what comes to his dealings with Russia, which has a certain impact on our immediate neighborhood as well. But it's up to us. I mean, what kind of the ambition we have? If we still have a kind of very light ambition, if we are not decided about our global role, it's probably better not to spell it out and not to encourage certain groups from our, I mean, to deal it in a lower kind of scale. But if we are to have a really global ambition, so then we have to be proactive and probably not to shy away from involving and interacting with our neighbors, because I mean, it brings both sides benefits immediately.
Petras, thank you very much. I think it's interesting that you pointed out that we need to start from our immediate neighborhood, and our ambition needs to be very clear what we want to achieve and how we want to achieve it before actually dreaming about being a strong global actor and playing on the geopolitical field outside of our immediate boundaries. Now, Marina, if I can go next to you, and actually connecting to what Petras was already saying, in the European Parliament late last year, you actually did say that the countries from the Eastern Partnership expect something from the European Union. They expect political commitment, resolute actions, supporting their democratic processes, and that actually the policy, the Eastern Partnership policy, has not failed, but it definitely needs reinforcement. And my question to you, it's again on that line, what kind of reinforcement do you envision? Here Petras talked about being more dynamic, being more practical, and be there when needed, not after. But do you think that there is a certain lack of political commitment from the European Union? Is it due to maybe the different national interests among the member states? I know here in our region, in Central and Eastern European countries, we have been interested and we have been involved in those policies, but are we enough by ourselves to ensure that commitment? And then just to make it even more challenging for you, because this is not challenging enough question, you are also very close to the civil society in these countries, and maybe we can make connection there as well, that what is the role of us, of the European Union, in supporting these societies in order to then increase that level of stability, avoid political crisis, bring more development.
Thank you, Vladislava. Thank you for the challenging questions. And like Petras, I'd also like to thank GLOBSEC for doing this discussion. And so good to see colleagues online. I prefer you seeing in the corridors of the parliament, but better online than not at all. And before I go to a question, I have to say that maybe my background is a little different. I've been for 30 years a career diplomat. I was Estonian foreign minister, and I was Estonia's ambassador to 6 countries, including Washington and Moscow. So that's why maybe my approach to Eastern Partnership is still very much influenced by my diplomatic background. I don't think that I'm 100% politician, so I can't say that I put my party interests above all. I put the people's interests in the Eastern Partnership countries much higher than my party interests. And that's something that I saw in the European Parliament, which was a bit astonishing for me, when some of my colleagues in the European Parliament are making statements that are not balanced, that are driven just by the moment party interests, and they forget about what the people of the neighborhood really need, want, and where they have to have our support. And needless to say that I focus much more on Eastern Partnership. So I'm not even trying to go into other neighborhoods. I'll concentrate on Eastern Partnership. And in the European Parliament, I'm the chair of the South Caucasus delegation, which means that I would say, if not on a daily, then on weekly basis, I talk to my colleagues in Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and I took in the criticism of Petras about activities of Special Representative Toivo Klaar to the region. And I have to say that he was active. One day before the war in Nagorno-Karabakh, he was in Azerbaijan. Soon after war, he went to Armenia. So not all the things in diplomacy are seen. Many things are done behind the scenes. So yes, maybe publicly not everything was so visible, but that's why Toivo is my very good friend and colleague. We both come from Estonia. That's why I wanted to say something in his defense. But now, Vladislava, coming to a question. What should we do and what can we do? Yes, I think that Eastern Partnership policy is a success. Yes, I'm disappointed at what we see today in Eastern Partnership countries. But the 10 years have been success. Why? First, each and every country has the right to decide about their future. Yeah, each and every country. And people, I don't know, in Maidan, people in Tbilisi, people, opposition in Belarus and others, they have made it very clear what they want to be their future. They want to be democratic country, they want to have close integration with the EU, they want to have transatlantic relations, full stop. They have spoken. And I see the role of EU and European Parliament to keep talking, to keep supporting these countries as long as they are on the path of democratic reforms. They have to have our full support. Even at the same time, I notice it here in the European Parliament that there is a fatigue. Everybody's tired about Ukraine. Everybody was tired about Georgia. Unfortunately, bad things or crisis has to happen. And then we have the topic on the agenda. So I also see my role as coming from Estonia to keep the topic of Eastern Partnership on the agenda in the European Parliament, to have meetings, to raise questions, to talk to the colleagues within the European Parliament, as well as the parliaments I mentioned. And I have to be also very frank and open. When I have the meeting of the South Caucasus delegation, a couple of MEPs show up. I do not see that there is much interest, and a couple of MEPs usually come, if not only from Baltics, then from Eastern European countries, and maybe a couple of additions from, I don't know, Sweden and a couple of other countries. So I see that there is not much awareness, and there is not much interest, at least towards Eastern Partnership among in the European Parliament. So my role is to put it on the agenda, to keep it on the agenda, also during the time when crisis is not happening. The actions of the EU, well, I've been on the side of the foreign ministers, yeah? And I've been really frustrated how slow we are, how bureaucratic we are, how much time we talk before we start doing something. And it's very disappointing that it took us a couple of months before we were able to put Lukashenko on sanctions list, yeah? But that's the reality. And if I have to choose whether we have a common policy which is weak, or we do not have common policy, I do support speaking in one voice. And where I see the strengths of the EU is, for example, the non-recognition of occupations. Occupation of Crimea, occupation of Abkhazia, occupation of South Ossetia, and so on. Non-recognition of occupation is a strong point. We have to keep to that. And as long as I'm in the European Parliament, I will be determined to have it there, to have it said each and every time we talk with Russia, each and every time we talk about our Eastern partners. And where we failed, we failed with Nagorno-Karabakh. And that's not a secret. We failed to be active during the Minsk process. We're represented, EU does not have a special role. We're represented there in the Minsk co-chair group by France. Unfortunately, France has lost credibility of at least one part of the conflict. I'm not blaming anybody, it's a reality. So for years, we did not see commitment, too much commitment to finding peaceful settlement for Nagorno-Karabakh. And the war was one of the results. Wars never find final solutions. It's a status quo. Yes, there's ceasefire, people are not dying on an everyday basis, every day, but there is no sustainable, long-standing solution before parties come together, start negotiating, and I don't see any other way than within the Minsk group. And my final point on civil society. I find civil society very important, and maybe because of my background, whenever I visited countries, I always met with women organizations. And when we talk about peace and security, I think that we have enough men around the table. We need more women, and civil society, women civil society organizations can do a lot. Being it, I don't know, Tilla Quintilla, which is active in Armenia, Azerbaijan, whatever, I can name many organizations. So yes, I do find them important. They need our support. And at the moment, what is most important, our partners need to know that we stand with them, we stand by them as long as they are on the course of the democratic reforms and closer integration with the EU. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marina. Actually, a lot you were able to say, and it was interesting to me that there is still a struggle to keep the topic, to fight this fatigue, right? That you talked about, and to keep interested all parties and all member states involved. When we talk about the Eastern neighborhood, when we talked about also Western Balkans, and that a lot of the work done is behind the closed doors, or it's not so public, but certainly has potential to move forward the Eastern, for example, the Eastern Partnership policy into the right direction. And it's interesting that even if we have a weak but common still foreign policy is better than having none. And there are examples, as you pointed out, that show strengths, such as the non-recognition of occupations. Now, your last words when you mentioned about civil society, when you talked about also the role of women, I would like to come next to Miriam. I wonder if you can a little bit bring your experience as well, and tell us how could our policy, the European Union policy, be more insistent in order to support these democratic values or European values, as we talk about the rule of law. How can we help build further the civil culture in our neighborhood, either being the Western Balkans or the Eastern Partnership countries? And I think that this is a tough question, because our region, Central and Eastern Europe, we are involved, and maybe we want to be a leader, but can we? Because we also have our own shortcomings, and this brings maybe sometimes questions coming. If we cannot resolve problems in our house, how can we then be helping others? So maybe you can bring some of your experience and some of your thoughts into when we talk about values and the importance of values. And already it was mentioned by Marina, talking about opposition in Belarus. By the way, also a strong movement, the women's movement involved as well in this protest and in this process. Maidan was mentioned, Tbilisi, and the demonstrations. So certainly the civil society is active, but also there is a question about how to safeguard certain values, democratic values, even European values, if we can call them. Miriam?
Thank you very much, Vladislava. Thank you to GLOBSEC for organizing this very, I would say, timely event. And thank you for the question, because I think it all comes down to values. And unfortunately, I mean, when I read the description of this discussion, I started to think, like, we are always talking about the European values, but I think that we are forgetting to discuss what we really mean and how we are going to pursue. The Article 21 of the EU treaties is clearly saying that the same values which brought the member states together should be those values we should pursue in our foreign policy. And we are having discussions about the rule of law inside of the European Union, although I have to admit that often this discussion doesn't go to the core problems, and it's very often politicized, which I'm absolutely unhappy with, because if we are unable to have a open discussion without bringing politics and ideologies into the discussion, and while we are trying through values to play political games between the different political wings, political parties, between different or among different countries, we will not be able to pursue value-based policy in foreign policy, because we do not know any longer what it actually means. And then I believe that this pandemic has given us a mirror. We have for too long, we're hiding behind some kind of global multipolar world. We have to engage with everyone. We have to have economic ties with every country, because this is changing the countries. Through economic engagement with Russia, China, and other totalitarian regimes, we are actually changing the regimes. I think at the very beginning, in the early 90s, we probably believed it in, because the economic engagement in Central Eastern Europe and has practically brought democratic processes in Central Eastern Europe, which was the ex-communist part of Europe. But I think the situation there was very different, and there was a genuine support for the change, which the economic engagement has supported. Unfortunately, the totalitarian regimes, in the meanwhile, have learned how to use our money, not only to strengthen their own regimes, but also to corrupt our own democracies through different corruption schemes, through different money laundering schemes, through different pressure, through disinformation, engagement with the civil society, through different financial resources, through different companies. And we didn't want to see this. And I will tell one example. When I still work for the International Republican Institute, we started the project about 6 years ago to look into disinformation, how disinformation is corrupting democracy inside of the Western world, inside of the EU. Later on, we have realized that we also have to look inside of the United States as well. And the discussions were often very superficial. We were blaming Russia for disinformation, bringing disinformation into our regions, but we didn't want to see that we are part of the problem when we do not have a value-based and clear policy and clear strategy vis-à-vis Russia. We were trying to bring the information that we have to be careful with China as well. The answer was, well, why? We should do something with China. I mean, we have a very good economic cooperation. China is not the ideology, which I never understood how people, but this was a real debate about experts among politicians. China is good for us that to do business, and we don't care about anything else. The pandemic has brought us a mirror. Not only that we realize that our economic dependency from a totalitarian regime is highly risky for our countries, but we have also realized that China is able to influence our public opinions. China is able to influence the European Union structures, because we know that there was the scandal of that China practically changed the report of the EU on the disinformation coming from China. China is able to influence our diplomats, because we know that there was another scandal that China was censoring a letter coming from the EU diplomats, public letter which was published. And practically we have woken up into this situation, and we continue business as usual. There was this investment deal struck with China over Christmas. We still don't know practically all parts of it. It was not reflecting enough. I believe that the situation between the EU and the West and China has changed and has shown us a lot of weaknesses. But I don't want to talk about China. I will now come back to the topic, because the similar situation we see with Russia, we all know now. I mean, and I'm kind of sometimes surprised that we are talking for 20 years. I am in foreign policy, that Russia is a danger. And now, after the killing of Navalny, many new leaders are saying that this is a breaking point. We need to change our policy towards Russia, but we still continue business as usual. We are unable to use our own tools, which is the new European Magnitsky Act, to sanction those who are actually responsible for the poisoning of Navalny and the human rights breaches in Russia. And on top of that, where I come back to the corruption I mentioned before, that the regimes have learned how to corrupt our own democracies. I mean, we, unlike the US, we did not include corruption into the Magnitsky sanction scheme. So practically, we don't consider corruption as a human rights breach and corruption as a ground for sanctioning people and oligarchs from the totalitarian regimes who are practically depriving their people from freedom and from economic development, and using often our money to enrich themselves. Actually, I have to thanks to many colleagues, because we have written a letter which was signed by over 200 members of the European Parliament and National Parliament of the EU, which was sent to foreign ministers asking them to include corruption into the Magnitsky scheme. And I really believe that this, if we will do it, that will be finally a point where we will bring our values into our policies. And And of course, when we start to use the Magnitsky Act, because it was already mentioned, the sanctions against the people in Belarus and Lukashenko, sanctions against various oligarchs and politicians and judges and friends of Putin in Russia, that we are unable to put them on the list. I will mention also Nagorno-Karabakh, because it was mentioned by two of my colleagues.
Ja, die pfeifen mir da ins Ohr, unvorstellbar.
Lukas, verstehen. I cannot judge if the High Representative was or Special Representative was present or not. Of course, maybe he was there. But what kind of strikes me is that we have two countries which we find as our partners, Armenia and Azerbaijan. We work closely with these countries. We work closely with the ministers, with different civil society organizations, with NGOs, all the state structures. Defense and security is part of the policies where we are engaging with these two countries. And these two countries end up in an open conflict between each other. And our involvement is practically invisible, if there was any. And there are other two political global players involved in this conflict, and practically we are completely out of it. And my question is, we all knew that the situation between these two countries is difficult, that there is a potential of an open conflict, which was still implicitly there. We work with these countries on security matters, and we are unable to see that there is a conflict coming, and unable to engage with these countries to stop the conflict in such a way that it will prevent further conflict. And I will say finally, I know that Lucas will probably talk more about the Western Balkans, but I will mention Western Balkans as well. For many years, I mean, when I was engaged with the countries of Western Balkans, they were saying this joke that the EU is pretending that it's that will ever enlarge towards the Western Balkans, and we are pretending that we are doing the necessary reforms. This is for decades the situation, that they practically don't trust completely that we are very, very open and about the enlargement. And that's why they have to play different games, and they're open to other global players economically, just to kind of go on economically. Though, of course, this is also due to the way how the politics is settled. But this is also the result of our kind of vague policies and not openness for enlargement, which obviously is still hindered by some member states of the European Union. We have initiated, for example, one initiative now with some colleagues and written to High Representative that there is a very high risk that the Western Balkans is being bought by Chinese companies. And again, we are closing our eyes because it's the same policies we had for many years, and we want to continue engaging economically with China because it brings immediate economic profit. But we know that this is bringing geopolitically a loss of the Western Balkans, economically loss for our companies to be able to be engaged and bring some maybe stability and brings vulnerability vis-a-vis China of the whole region. And finally, also it brings ecological catastrophe because the Chinese companies are absolutely ignore the ecological criteria we have got. So I'll finish here, but yes, this was my answer, very long answer, where the values in the European Union stand. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miriam. No, very interesting. Very interesting that what you said about how we're still struggling to put our values in our policies, inwards and outwards, and the struggles with when we talk about corruption and disinformation, and still we are not there. We're not as strong and as assertive in our policies as we may wish to be. And it's a very good bridge that you mentioned the Western Balkans and especially this skepticism that is starting to show through opinion polls, but also through the decision of some of the governments that are making in the Western Balkans, that maybe there is not so much that people, ordinary people, are feeling kind of left behind from from the European Union, that their hopes have been shattered or the expectations are not matched. And so to this end, I would like to also welcome Mr. Lucas Mandl. Thank you for joining us. Definitely, I want to bring a little bit of conversation towards the Western Balkans. In your opinion, what are the foreseeable prospects for the region? We know, and Miriam already mentioned, that the countries are at a different level on the road to accession, that there are continuous problems. For me, we start talking about enlargement and enlargement policy, and it's not just at present, but the struggle has continued. Also, there has been fatigue for some time when the topic came up on the European scene. And as I already mentioned, we do see that a certain disappointment streaking through from our policies or lack thereof, or lack of excitement and lack of actually practical solutions for the way forward towards accession or towards further European integration in different areas in the region. So, Mr. Mandl, what must change in our policy to really prevent these other actors to fill those gaps that the EU is not so much assertive or consistent or absent? Miriam already pointed out that there are other actors as China and Russia and Turkey that very much are taking the opportunity. How can we ensure that the European Union's values, European Union's benefits and strengths are really coming through in the region, and it's ensuring stability and it's ensuring development? Again, a very, very non-challenging question, and as I've been asking everyone, very easy questions today. But Mr. Mandl, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thanks to GLOBSEC again. Sorry for joining late. We had major technical inconveniences here in the studios of the European Parliament. I hope they can be solved for the future. But now I'm here and I'm more than happy to listen and to have the opportunity to contribute. The question may be easy. I don't know if it was meant ironic from your side or not. Maybe the question can be understood as easy, but the challenges ahead are of major importance for the Europeans, each and every European, no matter where she or he lives, no matter whether she or he lives in an EU member state or not. You mentioned the external actors, which are trying to influence the region, and actually a lot has to change, because this was your question, what has to change? It's a lot. It has to change in EU policy to prevent the external actors from influencing the region. I hope you can hear me. I have some interference in my ear. I try to continue. Actually, the Western Balkans are a part of Europe. The 6 countries are at different stages, but anyway, the citizens of the 6 Western Balkan countries identify themselves with European values and see themselves included into Europe. Let it be put this way. We have lost Great Britain and Northern Ireland on the other side, and this is a pity, especially due to security issues, especially for people on the continent. It's a pity for security issues. We should we should do the best that we can not to lose the Western Balkans as well. That means that we have to treat the citizens of the Western Balkan countries on a same level as proper partners. I underline that because in history, one of the problems with the Western Balkans and with the treatment by major actors of geopolitics was that it was tried to impose from the outside what the citizens of the Western Balkans should do with their countries. Now they have democracies, they have freedom. We defend this freedom to act for themselves, to decide for themselves, and to develop their societies. And they can count on mutual support from EU side and from support of other EU member states. And this is something of major importance. We face that disinformation, for example, in Serbia regarding the vaccines, disinformation already in the beginning of the pandemic, also in Serbia regarding help of China. We face that influence from forces and actors of political Islam and Islamism are present in the region. And we also see that state actors like Turkey, like Russia, like China already mentioned, are also active. The EU is the largest donor, and many citizens, especially in Serbia, but also in other Western Balkan countries, assume that others would be larger donors and would give more money than the EU does. Actually, the EU is the largest donor, but the EU appears to be bureaucratic and focused on administrative issues. And that's a problem. It's a major problem, especially given the mentality, the question of human relations, the question of, I would say, friendship also with people in the Western Balkans. And the anonymity of decisions in the Council regarding foreign policy is also a trouble of EU policies, because it means that we are slow, we are extremely slow, and we are more bureaucratic than other powers in the world. And given the fact that the Western Balkans belong to Europe, and we should see our responsibility to take care of all European territory, not only of today's EU territory, we can do better than that. And in the best case, we would have a new EU treaty, which is anyway an important task of this very mandate we have at the moment. And the anonymity in the Council has to stop and has to be overcome, because negotiations on accession with Albania and North Macedonia have not yet started due to this problem. Because visa liberalization for the people in Kosovo has not yet been granted due to this problem, even while it was promised and Kosovo fulfilled all criteria, and all the 5 other Western Balkan states people are already privileged with this visa-free travel, as well as the people of the huge Ukraine, for example. So there is absolutely no no reasonable argument for not providing the Kosovo people with visa liberalization. And we see, let's say, not yet any success of Mr. Lajcak's endeavor to coordinate a result in the dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia, which would be a major task of EU. Of course, it's also an obligation of the officials of Kosovo and Serbia to fulfill the task, but it's in the interest of EU and the Europeans that this task will be fulfilled, and there will be a result. And Mr. Lajcak thought to be capable of fulfilling this. He has not yet achieved anything, but we push them, especially from the side of the European Parliament, which is always, let's say, in a pioneer's role when it comes to foreign policy and to integration policy and to accession of countries. And last point from my side for the moment is that we have to convey the message that the fight for rule of law and reforms, especially in the field of rule of law in all the Western Balkan countries, in all the 6 of them, is not a bureaucratic administrative EU obsession, but it's rather a precondition for investments, and investments lead to jobs, and jobs lead to wealth and opportunities in the field of education, better health systems, and all these fields where reforms domestically are expected in the Western Balkan countries in order to put them in the position to be ready for EU integration, which is actually a historic duty, a historic obligation, that we fulfill this task of integrating all parts of Europe, all European territory, which is not yet part of EU countries. We also negotiate the fight, the defense against disinformation in a special committee here in the European Parliament. And the Western Balkans are of utmost importance and play a crucial role in that field, because forces that try to divide our societies, that's what it's all about, to divide our society, to divide EU, to divide political parties, to divide political groups. The forces who try to impose division within Europe are especially active in the Western Balkans, because due to the lack of consistency in EU policies, they see some opportunities for their attacks actually against the EU.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mando. Very interesting indeed that it is in the interest of the European Union that it's a two-way communication, it's a two-way highway, and that not to see this exercise, which is quite important to further integrate the region, Western Balkan region, not just as a benefit for those countries, but it is in the interest, historical also, and it's a historical duty, as you pointed out. I find it also interesting that you did mention that when we talked about European Common Foreign Policy, we are time and time again getting back to some of the shortcomings of the way, the slowness, the bureaucratic nature of it, and unanimity that more often prevents this assertive action that we're looking forward. And as Petras right away said at the beginning, if we are looking to be a global actor, it will be hard for us to compete with single states. That the decision-making process it's in a different level and different system. So this is also a question that probably will come up, and probably we will discuss it among citizens, maybe even starting soon with the conference on the future of Europe. Who knows where we're going to get there? But I would like to actually open the floor for questions because we have less than half an hour, and we already have 2 questions. And I suggest that we gather the questions, and if everybody agree, then I will let, if they are not specific to a member of the European Parliament, then we can you can choose which question to answer. If that is agreeable, let's start. And I would like to bring first Florence, go ahead, ask and make your comment.
Hi, so Florence Masek, I'm calling from Vienna, Austro-French Center for Rapprochement in Europe. Thank you for all your interventions. So very interesting to get this point of view from Eastern Europe. I got some interference. Yeah, so I'm actually quite French, so please excuse me if my question is a bit too French. So we have the feeling that we do have a strategic vision for the East and the surrounding for the continent, that the EU would shape a value-based political order. This was also the comment of Marina and many others. But there is a feeling that there is no clear strategic objective, how to operationalize that. There is a lot of confusion here. On the one hand, we have a preamble of the Treaty of Rome inviting people in Europe to join in efforts carried by the EU. So it bears this idea, it's also Article 49, that enlargement should be somewhere. And we have concretely Georgia and Moldova, who are more frontrunners compared to Serbia in terms of civil liberties and democracy. If you look at Freedom House, we have Georgia, which is more developed in terms of GDP per capita than Albania or Kosovo, so somehow closer to the Union. But on the other hand, we have the feeling that enlargement is a taboo for the Eastern Partnership countries, and it is a dirty word, or it has become a dirty word for the Western Balkans. So the lack of strategic confusion, as a lack of strategic objective, and I'm coming to the question, leads to this ineffectiveness of the EU, how to operationalize its vision, and the lack of credibility. So in response to that, and that's my question, some say we should maybe not speak with one voice to avoid some blockers towards the Eastern Partnership, for instance, Cyprus in the case of Belarus, for instance, my country, France, in the case of the Western Balkans, and relax the unanimity commitment in foreign policy and in the enlargement. I would like to have your how do you perceive this proposal of relaxing these unanimity commitments and maybe not being able to speak with one voice, but in a way with a more differentiation, being more effective? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. I will gather the next Kinga. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, and good morning. It's really interesting, Florent. I will maybe do a short comment, Vladi, if you allow, because we just this week we will be publishing a brief on EU foreign policy priorities in 2021.
Kinga, we cannot hear you very well. Can you maybe speak up a little bit? Thank you.
And actually, the flexibility
oh, but the churches, they have different opinion on some ideologies, or they're a little bit closer to Russia or whatever. But I believe that this is exactly the type of organizations where we need to engage, and we are failing in that. About the question about unanimity, I think unanimity vote in a foreign council, I think we have the problem that we are absolutely divided in terms of approach to foreign policy among the member states. I mean, the visit of Borrell to Moscow has shown it, and I think the biggest failure was that Borrell didn't have any mandate, because practically we are not united in our position. And I don't think the change of the votes will actually improve the situation, because it will probably make it even more divided, that the different member states will not even respect the decisions if they are not taken unanimously. So I think that the homework is still with us, that we need to do more in order to try to unite our approach, and really not to have a kind of approach as we usually have, that we have a general policy, but we completely ignore that some member states have a different policy. For example, now, after Borrell's visit to Moscow, yes, that's true what Marina has said, that it kind of brought us more closer together, because we were humiliated as an EU. On the other hand, I see the kind of like we are talking more about the unity, but the projects which are deviating from the unity, like, for example, the Nord Stream 2, are completely ignored. That we are not working on the fringes. We are still kind of declaring more unity, but not cutting the fringes and the divisions. So, and in terms of the kind of political engagement, or to improve the political engagement in the region, I would say that all the summits, they have the meetings with the political families. So this is happening in a way, but I understand that we need to engage more, not only kind of in a general policies with the different states of the Eastern Partnership, for example, or the Western Balkans, but we need to engage, I believe, more in the kind of security day-to-day policies, where we would be able to see the potential of the conflicts, the tensions, and also the kind of geopolitical setting of the different countries, and only then we can approach it.
Thank you very much, Miriam. Mr. Mandl, and Petras started our conversation, and he will have the honor also to conclude it after that. Thank you. Mr. Mandl.
Thank you, if I may. Thank you very much. While I underline everything my colleagues have already said, and why I see each and every contribution from the round of discussion and the question round as really reasonable, I just want to briefly add the one or the other point of view. And I want to start with Sebastian, who has mentioned the political parties in our home states and the governments in our home states regarding foreign policy. Of course, we have to be bridge builders as parliamentarians. This is one of the obligations of parliamentary work, I would say, to convey messages about the overall European development on issues with our home parties and with the governments and of course the parliaments in our home countries. And while I share all the critiques about unity and the lack of unity, I really share it. I want to also underline some, let's say, positive aspects or reasons for optimism, at least, some optimistic views. And one of them is that the Council has unanimously voted on strengthening sanctions against responsible persons in the Russian leadership after the Navalny case and after this Borrell visit, which was really a shame for European Union. And it was not only a shame because we are not united or we would not be united in foreign policy, but also Borrell was not prepared, even not enough prepared for that visit. It would have been easy to figure out at least 4 or 5 policy points he could have addressed publicly, clearly, directly, and also in the talks he had in Moscow, beginning with disinformation and other areas but he wasn't prepared. And on the other side, the Council at least made it happen that we strengthened sanctions. What Jan has emphasized regarding the problem of lack of attention for the Eastern Partnership and the lack of platforms for security issues, I totally agree with. We generally talk not enough about security and the whole framework of security and all the circumstances and preconditions we need for strategic autonomy of Europe. We even underestimated, and that's really my critiques on that, from EU side, we underestimated the meaning and the importance of security in the Brexit negotiations. In the Brexit agreement, we have absolutely no caretaking of security issues, and Europe needs the British contribution to security, and this will have to be achieved and affected bit by bit and step by step, because there is no provision taken for that. This is really a pity, but we can include now third countries in PESCO. Again, one optimistic and positive aspect about it, maybe we will be successful in including the United Kingdom into PESCO. It would be for the best of Europe entirely, I would say. And Kinga pointed out the things that the parliamentarians in this very parliament don't like to hear that often, but they are anyway true. We don't have the leverage we would like to have on behalf of the citizens we have the privilege to work for. But anyway, we achieve from time to time goals in pushing the Council and the Commission forward, especially when it comes to integration policies and accession policies and fighting threats from other parts of the world which seek conflict with Europe, while we always seek cooperation, and I guess we have to keep seeking cooperation, and especially due to, I would say, the diversity of the compilation of European Parliament, peoples and countries and governments and parliaments in integration accession countries have their persons, parliamentarians to talk to in this very parliament, and that's why parliamentary diplomacy must not be underestimated at all. And Florent has mentioned the word of enlargement, I guess, and I try to be brief now. We can talk about it maybe philosophically for ages, but it's true, especially domestically in some today's EU member states, maybe in all, I don't know, the expression, the term enlargement became, you call it a dirty word, a word that's not easily used in public debates because it's not properly understood. And of course, today's EU citizens don't feel the EU would be fit for accession of new countries, unfortunately, because we also today, but that's not a mistake of today's event, it's an everyday problem. We always talk about problems to be solved and trouble. We have to solve problems, we have to meet the trouble, we have to deal with the challenges, but we also have to seek visions, positive perspectives, for example, the Western Balkans, but also for the Eastern neighborhood. And what I always try to underline, and maybe I end with this today, and I finish there, is that one positive outlook for the Western Balkan countries, the 6 of them, can be that they become some kind of Silicon Valley of Europe. Why do I emphasize that? Because there is nearly no traditional industry left. In some countries more, in some less, in some nearly no industry. But there are many young people, and they are seeking education, and they are willing to work, and they feel as Europeans, and the vast majority feels belonging to the Western political Western world. And all these circumstances are a good precondition for investing in digitalization, in the education in that field, in academics, in innovation in that field, in order to put the people there in a position to remain in their countries and to work there and to create, let's call it a Silicon Valley of Europe. Beside all trouble and problems we have to solve, let's also seek positive opportunities for the future, because maybe future generations will profit from that, not only in the Western Balkans or the Eastern neighborhood, but all over Europe. Thank you again for having me, and sorry again for being late due to these technical issues, and thanks for the great work GLOBSEC is always doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mandl, and Petras, to you.
Thank you. I think we have to remember that out of 27 member states, 21 is a result of enlargement. Okay, so enlargement is not just a past. In fact, it's very present. But we have to be creative. We have to be creative in order to probably make certain adjustments when it comes to our neighborhood, both, I would say, all directions, which are in compliance with the potential membership, and to propose some probably new schemes and new mechanisms how to adjust and to bring countries to the limits of enlargement. Political consensus is not existing, not at all. I mean, we have to create it, but maybe even some gradual approximation procedures might help. I'm very much in support of gradual integration, especially in economic matters for freedoms. I mean, essentially important for Eastern Partnership countries. As long as they comply with it, I believe we will have more willingness to support enlargement in future as well. But it's not given at all. On European Endowment of Democracy, it's a good instrument, no doubt. Sometimes only existing instrument to reach out our partners on the ground. For example, Belarus in particular for the time of being, knowing how repressive regime is trying to, defend its sphere of influence, especially media and so on and so forth. And there are no more, means how to reach it out. But member states have to be more willing, to contribute. To my knowledge, only 17 member states are part of European Endowment of Democracy. A big country like France is not. Why? Does it mean that South neighborhood is out of scope of EED? Not at all. EED is very busy in Southern neighborhood. On political high-level attention. Sometimes I find myself in a kind of, situation when EU still, or some in EU, still recognizes the concepts of zones of influence. All right, and they don't try, to break those red lines, established by someone, and they try to keep those, and Russia in particular. So, excuse me. That's why. We have to. Get away from this zone of influence way of thinking. And in fact, I think it should be a political commitment of all political groups, all pro-European political groups from right to left, to engage with neighborhood, because it's not just about economy, it's not just about border crossing, it's about security, human contacts, and culture, European culture. Europe belongs not to member states but to Europeans, and we have to remember this. As long as we do it, it's fine. And finally, look, we have to respect ourselves. When I hear, information when the former Austrian Foreign Minister Katrin Kneissel is to join Rosneft board, the biggest state-run Russian company, and she is kind of recommended by Gerhard Schröder, a great supporter of Nord Stream. I have many doubts that we are learning a lesson, but I hope we will. So that's why thank you for GLOBSEC for this exchange, and I think we made a few steps forward in our discussion. Thank you.
Petrus, thank you very much. I think you said it right. Hopefully this type of discussions will bring eventually, I have a list from all of your last comments, a whole list of 2 pages of ideas and solutions, and I will not repeat them, but we'll see them in a summary just next week. But I think that it's important that we identified some strengths as well. We identified some challenges, but I really like the idea that while we need to solve problems, we also need to have some clear visions and looking forward in a positive way. And Silicon Valley of Europe, why not? Let's do it. Let's think about it. Thinking about the right tools, recalibrating so we can have democratic support in a way that we're envisioning it. All good stuff. And I'm very grateful to all of you to join us today for this quite interesting discussion. I believe that we will meet again in the future. We will maybe solve together in the future some of the issues that we discussed. I wish all of you a very good day, a very lovely end of the week. And while we are all very concerned with many challenges and many crises that are happening around us in our neighborhoods, inside the European Union, we're in the midst of our health crisis. We didn't even talk today about vaccination diplomacy and all of that. I still wish you to stay healthy and positive. Thank you, and until next time, goodbye from Bratislava. Goodbye.
Goodbye from Brussels as well. Bye then.
Bye.